Actung, and hello, it's James Holland here on We Have Ways of Making You Talk, and this is my interview with Captain Stan Parry, the last surviving officer of the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry. And last time, when we left the pod, Stan had just been shot, and we were wondering what was going to happen to him. Well, in this final instalment, we're going to find out. Hope you enjoy it.
It was sniper.
Well, you're lucky you got your arm and not your head.
Yeah. I was like that.
So you was aiming for your head?
So I got in there. I'm six or 8 inches away. Anyway, my wireless op constructed a splint. Yeah. Some bit of wood he found from somewhere. Splintered my arm up, and what do we do next? Well, we'll keep on. Well, first, there was a little row of poplar trees visible. I could see a bit of movement, I thought, in one of them. Mm-hmm. So we machine gunned up and down the poplar trees all the way, and the first one we did, a figure dropped out of it. And I think that was the sniper who got me, so we machine gunned him out of his hiding. And then I thought, we'd better push on and try and get to the top of this hill. And
your arm must have been bleeding like hell.
It was slightly painful, but it wasn't bleeding that much.
Oh, really?
I think the bullet was still in it, or a part of the bullet. When I got back, they operated on me. They said there was a piece of metal in there anyway. Right. Whether it was snub nose or what, I don't know. But anyway, it was it hurt a bit. But it was going to hurt there. It didn't matter whether I went up or down. Right. It was going to hurt. So carried on, and then there was a big bang. And my driver said, "I've lost all my steering." And Panzer Faust had
another one,
a third one. We shot one up on the way. Didn't tell you that. We saw this little truck being towed through the bocage, and we machine gunned it first, and then dropped a couple of HE shells on it where we thought it was, and it blew stuff in the air. It was quite clear we'd destroyed that. But this was the third one, and it had separated off my near side track driving sprocket. So the near side track was jammed, but the offside track was working. And I could go round in circles. But I'd say I had a very good driver, and he, by inching forward and then braking a bit, and then inching forward a bit more, he could drag the dead track and still move a bit. So then luckily my wireless op said, "I've managed to jury rig an aerial, and I've got squadron command." He said, "I can't get any response or call from A and B, my two other tanks."
Yep.
He said, "It's just no response from them." Anyway, I called squadron command and said, I'm pretty well crippled. I've both personally and tank-wise, and I think I'm going to have to pull out. And Jack said, "Well, you better come back to squadron." And my driver managed to get us down the hill, back over the river.
That's one track?
on one track.
That's amazing.
By that time, the bridge had been reconstructed, so we didn't have to go. We didn't have to.
You go across a Bailey Bridge or something.
Fun?
A Bailey Bridge had been put across.
No, I think they'd reconstructed the blown-out bridge. They may have built some steel structure around it for support. And
But anyway, you got across.
I was not very observant by then.
No, I'm sure.
Got back to Squadron Command, and one of the medic chaps had a look and said, "Christ, FMO,
Yeah.
full medical FMU, forward medical unit," and somebody helped me get down to there.
So it's
They-
goodbye to Bob and Ron and Charlie.
Fun?
Goodbye to Bob and Ron and Charlie.
Yeah, one of them. Got there, and chap took one look at it and he said, "Oh," he said, "you're for home. We can't do anything over here, you'll have to be repatriated." Called up an ambulance and still had my pistol. Ambulance driver said, "Not taking you wearing that." And then I saw 8th Armoured Brigade dingo coming down the road. So I stopped and I said,
Right.
"Can you look?" It was the Brigadier.
Ah.
So I gave him my pistol. So, at any rate, went back to Portsmouth on
And that's when you ended up in Bagley.
fun.
And that's when you ended up in Bagley.
That was when I ended up in Bagley. That was fun. Landed in Portsmouth. I was still able to walk about a bit, and we had a hospital train parked across a level crossing, or beside a level crossing.
Yeah.
And there was a pub at the level crossing, so I couldn't have to with a pint. Asked the medic how long before we moved, and he said, "A couple of hours before we get on the move."
You thought, right.
So I nipped down to the pub and ordered a pint, went to pay for it, and the landlord said, "Are you insulting me, sir?" And I said, "No, I'm paying for my pint." He said, "You're not paying for beer in here." And all of a sudden there were 5 pints of beer lined up. And then I had a couple of pints, and somebody came with a massive basket, and it had got all sorts of goodies in it, bars of chocolate and things like that. And they said, when you go back to your train, will you take that and share it out among the lads? And
Amazing.
then all of a sudden, a lady with a white headdress appeared, and she said, "I've had to search some places for my patients, but never a public bar," because they were getting ready to move off.
Right.
And then we went up to Bagley, and sister in charge of the officers' ward there, a lady called Sister Ingram, I recall. Her husband was police sergeant at Ringway, oddly enough. She came out and helped me into the hospital, and we got on. They operated and splintered and plastered and did all these things, and then they wouldn't let me go. I wasn't fit enough for.
Were you a bit annoyed about that? Was that frustrating?
Yes, it was. I wanted to get back to the regiment.
Did you?
Well, the SRY was such, one lost one's heart to it, you know. And I think that was largely Colonel's attitude through, but everybody was the same.
Right.
And I had Frank Galvin, who was killed, and I never understood that. Frank was blown up and brewed up at the Noiro, and the plan was that I was lead troop. Frank was to follow and give me some cover on the right, and when we'd positioned ourselves at the top of the hill, Stewart Hills was to drive through and go on and attack Berjou.
Right.
Frank, I only heard this afterwards. I didn't know because my radio was out of operation. I wasn't in touch with anybody. But Frank, according to the book, was hit by a Panzerfaust, brewed up, and the whole of his crew perished in the tank. This is where Padre Skinner came in. He could not separate the bodies, and they're all buried in a common grave just outside Berjou. But I was hit 3 times with a Panzerfaust, and didn't brew up. And I couldn't believe that Frank had presented his backside to one, but possible. But I think that it was much more likely that he was hit by a much heavier, probably an 88
or 75.
And
I mean, some of those 75mm pack guns. I mean, the Pack 40 has still got
yes, they were
velocity on it.
They packed a lot of. But it had all the feel of a dismounted 88 to me. And afterwards, it was said that Frank had taken the wrong road. And I told you this road diverged, and I suspect he'd gone up to the right, and I suspect there was an 88 tucked up somewhere in that V. So I suspect he was hit by a much bigger thing than a Panzerfaust.
Yeah.
And he was a good friend. He joined the regiment a few days after I did, but C Squadron.
So how do you deal with kind of losses of friends? Do you just sort of try and put it out of mind?
You try to. I think, thinking back and over the years, you don't forget. But there are sort of really 3 things in your mind. There's the first, your conscience that you actually killed some young chap who was probably not very different from you and had and you shot him without thinking about it. And then there was matters of conscience.
Because you'd had those questions of conscience as a 17-year-old, hadn't you?
Yeah. Yes. Well, so that was related to whether you were what you were doing in fighting and killing other people. But then there was also the conscience of the mind worry, the memory. Had you been a better soldier?
Right.
Had you deployed differently on a different occasion? Would that have saved the life of some of your men? And so you were leading people and very often directing people to what was certainly very dangerous and very likely to lead to maiming or death. And you were giving them orders to go into that.
Yeah.
And that hangs about. And then the other scars you have, of course, are the physical scars from wounding. But I mean, they're medical science being what it is, they go away.
Well, I mean, you know,
but there are
it advanced so fast in the war.
There are these two scars on the mind forever. You did it, and were you good enough? Were you thoughtful enough about deployments and attacks and where you led people? If you've been a bit clever, and very often you were doing things very quickly on the spur of the moment, with very little solid information or intelligence. So excusable in a lot of ways. I think with coronavirus, the government will have made some mistakes, but they had to make those mistakes short notice, little intelligence, little information about the reality of coronavirus, and that's very similar to war, which you make decisions very quickly. You have to do them immediately.
You haven't got time to analyse it, have you?
There's no time to think over, even if there is intelligence there. There's not a lot of time to think over that. And you get sort of inbuilt quirks, if you like the fact that I would never ever approach a road junction on the road. Very difficult in Normandy in particular, in rural Normandy, narrow lanes, very often high banks, and sometimes your tank would be running 4 or 5 feet above road level, and your tracks would be on the banks, and but so you avoided roads wherever you could. But particularly I avoided going up the junctions. Because of earlier trainings, I did dismount in inhabited areas quite often, very narrow streets in the French villages. Ideal for somebody to sit up in the top bedroom and lob a grenade down into your tank. So I did not infrequently dismount and have a look on the ground before committing my tank through a roadway. I had one lovely incident. I met a Frenchman. My French was fairly passable then, and I met this Frenchman on the outskirts of the village, and I said to him, "Are there any Germans in the village?" And he said, "I think they've all gone, but," he said, "there's one house there where I think there might still be some left in." And so I dismounted and took my gunner with me. I armed him with a rifle or probably a Sten gun, and I had my 45, and I went to this house and stationed him on the side of the door, and I kicked the door in, saw a movement inside and shot. There was a big bang and a whir. I'd shot a grandfather clock. Anyway, we went into the house and the Germans weren't in there, but there was a bottle of wine standing on the table and a glass beside it. The cork had been pulled from the bottle, but the bottle was full, and my gunner said, "Oh, Lord, stop!" Because I could see a little trail underneath. I looked underneath, and there'd been a 6-foot nail through the table and a spring, and connected to a flex and fuse
Goodness.
and an anti-personnel.
God, that was sharp thinking on your part.
And so, having done my training, I was able to dismantle it. And
Was that SAS training that enabled you to do
Yes. Yes.
Goodness me.
Managed to dismantle it.
And that was in Normandy, was it?
Fun.
That was in Normandy, obviously.
That was in Normandy. There was another occasion in Normandy where language was handy. I think it was Jack being assailed by a Norman farmer.
Jack Holman.
Jack Holman, yeah. And Jack's language was pure English, Cornish. He didn't speak French, or very little. And he couldn't understand what it was all about. I translated. This Norman farmer was alleging that a couple of our soldiers had cut steaks from the haunches of one of his living cows. When we tracked it all down, it was a couple of medics who'd seen this beast, and it had got infected. It had had shrapnel wound or something across its haunch, and it had been infected, and they cleaned it up and stuck field dressing on it. And this French farmer thought that they'd cut a steak out of a living cow,
Only the English would do that, wouldn't they?
which was quite fun.
So when you were back in Bagley, is that when you met your wife, did you say?
I met my wife there. I got reasonably. I was walking wounded then, and
this was late August by the time.
it was late September. It was September the 20th, and if that was a Saturday, it was a couple of days before my wife's birthday. That's why I know the date. She was 18 on the 22nd of September, and we were allowed out of the hospital to go into Manchester for a night out.
Right.
And I and another tag soldier who'd been quite badly burned, actually. He used to tap his skin like that, and he immediately got a massive hematoma. But he and I went in town and outside the Queen's Hotel in Manchester, there were a couple of girls, one a bit older than the other, and we said, would you like to come in for a drink? We picked up these couple of girls. One of them was a Dane, and that was Lisa. And we became rather attached to each other anyway.
Well, we're just going to take a break now, but do join us again to hear more from Stan Perry. So what was Lisa doing over in England?
Lisa, her parents, her father had a business on the Thames in London, and he was into feathers,
right,
making feather beds and that sort of thing. And they lived in Hendon, but there'd been quite a bit of bombing, and they'd come up to Stockport, where her father had a connection with the bloke who owned a factory in Stockport. And anyway, she and her mother had come up to Stockport, and her brother was in the Air Force. He was killed in Italy.
What, flying for the RAF?
What? couple of months after I was wounded the second time. He was flying.
He was killed in March.
He was flying Beauforts, I think.
Right.
He hates them.
Coastal Command.
He was in the. They had an Air Force squadron that was doing reconnaissance over Yugoslavia and that region. But anyway, the two of them, I think her sister was
Well,
all
Auntie Eva must have been involved.
Auntie Eva, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, they'd shipped them up to Stockport to have a rest from the bombing in London and a couple of weeks away from home. And the landlady and Lisa had gone into Manchester for a night out,
Right.
which is why she was there. Anyway, we got rather fond of each other, and we saw each other every day that it was possible to do. Then I got posted down to Newmarket to go back to the regiment. I had to get a letter from Stanley Christopherson in which he wrote the return of this officer to his regiment at the earliest possible opportunity is requested. And he struck out requested and wrote in over the top of it, demanded. So that took a bit of a long time, and then I got embarkation leave, and I rang Lisa and said, I've got a week or so's embarkation leave. Will you marry me before I go back? And she said, I don't know, I'll have to ask my mum. I said, I can be, will you marry me on Monday? And she came back and she said, no, Mum says no. It's unlucky to get married on a Monday. If you get married, you'll have to be married on Saturday. So we got married on Saturday.
How amazing.
September the 16th.
September the 16th.
December.
And
December the
then
16th.
They had a bit of a checkered career because they were supposed to get married in St Clement Dane.
I went out and rejoined the regiment near Maastricht, actually, at the time.
So you missed Geilenkirchen.
I missed Geilenkirchen, I missed all that bloody stuff going up to the German border. But I did get involved in the stretch across to Heinsberg. And that photograph I got in there of the tank group, that was a couple of days before Heinsberg. Jackie Holman went on leave.
So did you have a completely new crew at this point?
I had a completely new crew.
And how did you get on with them?
My sergeant was a chap called Taubman. And Taubman, Taubman.
My local doctor's called Rachel Taubman.
Oh.
Such an unusual name. I wonder if they're related.
Yeah.
Oh well, he's in the list of casualties because we were lagered up and we were going in to attack Heinsberg. A mortar bomb dropped on the top of his tank and killed him.
Taubman's tank.
Taubman. And he was just in rest. I mean, it was the mortar, and fell on his tank, but it landed right beside. He was standing up in the tank in the turret, and killed him. And there again, Padre Skinner was absolutely wonderful. He took Taubman's body out, and he got in and he cleaned the blood and guts from inside of the tank. And that was typical of the Padre. I had a nice incident with him. Somewhere in Normandy I had managed to acquire a small barrel of concentrated Calvados. They used to leave it in a barrel
Yeah.
over winter to freeze and then drill through and pour off the unfrozen alcohol, about 65 proof.
Yeah, I bet.
The lads called it rosewater. But somehow or other I'd acquired a little barrel of this.
Right.
On the back of my tank. And Skinner loved a glass of cider, a mug of cider.
Right.
And he always carried a little enamel mug on his belt.
Did he?
And he came by the tank and he saw the barrel, took his mug out,
Oh, funny.
thinking it was cider, a big swig, and nearly blew his head off. And, we had a tremendous laugh over there. These are the fun moments
Yeah, no, sure.
of the thing. But he was terrific. Anyway, Jack Holman was on leave for this for the Heinsberg attack, and we had a CLY transferred into the regiment called John Coleman, and he was a very nervous bloke, and he called an O group on the drop of a hat, and we were waiting to move off actually to go and attack Heinsberg, and he called an O group, and substantially what he asked was, "Do you know what you're doing?"
Yeah.
One gets a bit cynical sometimes. I
Yeah.
shouldn't be. He was a nice chap, but
But
but he had this penchant for bloody O groups. And I was on my way back to my tank from the O group, and I heard this whir and a big bang. Thought, Christ, the naval Werfer. And then there was a whir and another bang, and I thought, oh, getting a bit close. Better get my head down, and I was diving for a bit of cover when the third one went off, and I got peppered down my left chest and arm and in my face and my right leg.
but you were in the tank at the time, were you?
No, I was heading back to the tank from
I
the
see.
bloody O group. I was on foot.
If only you hadn't had a bloody O group.
Yes, and
Oh, I see, got you.
so
So that was you prostrate.
that
that
was
was
me,
you,
yes, and
So when was that? Was that March?
January.
January.
Yeah.
It was called in the mall.
And I
Barely got back.
got shipped into an American hospital,
Right.
which was rather fun, because I was unconscious.
Yeah.
And when I woke up in the morning, there was a replica Purple Heart on the locker beside my bed.
That's fantastic.
That's rather nice, I've got a Purple Heart. And then this American cleric, or whatever he was, came by with his clipboard and said, "What's your regiment, soldier?" And I said, "Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry." "Who the hell are the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry?" I said, "Well, the leading tank regiment in the British Army." "Oh, you're a limey." I said, "Well, yeah, I'm British." "Oh, you can't have that then. You took my Purple Heart away."
So you never got it back?
I never got it back. No, never got my Purple Heart.
The Sherwood Rangers, while you were away, they'd spent quite a lot of time with America.
Yes, I did.
Because they were with the 82nd and then the 84th.
Yeah. When I was,
Was that for you, the war is over?
for me, that was the end. Yeah. British Legion, because I was so newlywed, were in negotiation to fly my wife out to Brussels to
Really?
come and say goodbye to me.
So it was touch and go for you, was it?
It was touching. I was on the dangerously ill list for 3 or 4 weeks,
Oh, really?
and then I was on the seriously ill list for a few more months.
You got your pineapple juice.
That was in this American hospital. I was there for a couple of days. Barely. I was getting. I got addicted to morphine. I was on 5 grains every 4 hours or something, and I was on penicillin.
Yep. The wonder drug.
4 shots.
Yeah.
4 shots a day, in and out of consciousness. But this American soldier came in. They were sure I was on my way out, and in fact, his phraseology was fine. He said, "Is there anything you want? Any last wishes?" Any last wishes? And I said, "I tell you what," I said, "I know you've got this PQ thing. I do like a glass of pineapple juice." So next day, a case, a couple of dozen cans of tinned pineapple.
You see that only the English would do that, only the Americans would do that.
Yeah, they were.
Well, everybody else.
I say
loved them
these
because
were
they got the pineapple.
these were the fun moments. But eventually, I was flown back.
War was over by this stage.
I was into.
Can you remember the war ending?
Fun?
Can you remember hearing the war was over?
Yeah, I was
Combatants,
fairly alive. I was still in hospital. I wasn't allowed out. But sort of immediately after being wounded, I was moved from the American hospital to one that was run by Belgian nuns. They were all nurses, and I still have a little wooden brooch.
How fantastic!
Which one of them had bought for me and given me to give to my wife, and it's still up in the jewellery box.
How brilliant! Oh, one thing I must ask you: when you came back, did you rejoin C Squadron?
Yes.
So where was Jack Holman by that stage? Did he?
Jack was still squadron commander of C Squadron.
Yeah.
But he went off on leave. He'd done his 6 months or whatever I think.
Right.
Yeah, Jack was still squadron commander, and I was very welcomed back.
Great.
By everybody. Even the colonel came down and said hello. So I was very welcomed back. It was rather nice. Stuart Hills was still about.
John Semkin had gone back by that point.
John Semkin I think he'd been wounded then, and he'd been repatriated. I think all the 3 squadron commanders at this point had all gone on leave.
Right.
Back to UK.
Yeah.
And all the squadrons were commanded by the second commands.
One other thing, I remember talking to someone who was saying that, he never wore his boots in the tank, he always wore plimsolls. And another person told me that he had a pair of brogues that he preferred to wear rather than his boots. Did you have any kind of sort of quirk?
Yes, I wore a pair of suede boots.
Did you? Where did you get the suede boots from? They were just desert boots, weren't they?
Somebody from the desert, I suspect.
Right. But you had those suede desert boots, did you?
Yes.
With the rubber soles?
That's right, yeah. And they were very handy.
You don't want boots clattering around, hobnail boots.
Well, hobnail boots with button segs in them were very, if you got on the back of the tank.
You'd slide all over the place, wouldn't you?
The little rubber soles were a nice grip.
Yeah.
And they were comfortable.
Yeah.
And if I happened to kick the gunner in his left ear, it didn't hurt so much as an ammunition boot.
Yeah.
No, I wore a neckcloth.
Did you? Like a neckerchief?
Rather than a tie.
Right.
Well, actually, it was a scrap of lady's dress made into a bow. Different story, that. And that was quite good. But I got moved from the American to this hospital just outside Brussels. Which,
so when were you reunited with Lisa?
I was flown back to Breeze Norton,
Right.
oddly enough.
Yep.
And then ambulanced to just outside Weston-super-Mare. It was the Birmingham Saturday Fund holiday home.
Right.
Apparently Birmingham miners had a
Right.
penny a week fund, and
Okay.
they ran, and it had been converted to a chest hospital.
Right.
The senior chest surgeon was a Spaniard, oddly enough, and so I was there. They went to work on me. I had a couple of bits of rib taken out
Right.
because I got shrapnel in my lung. They did a bit of digging, and I had for a long time, until July at least, I had a rubber tube in my back,
Goodness.
which had to be taken out every day and cleaned, and that had to be done by a nurse. And then once a week, they used to take an eighth of an inch or so. Apparently it was to drain the lung,
Right.
and if they'd just taken it out, the lung would have encapsulated,
Right.
and with the risk of retaining infection in it. So
You have to do it very slowly.
what they did was take it out once a week and snip an eighth of an inch off the end of it,
Right.
and make it a little bit shorter.
Right.
And gradually, it was July before that was completely removed, and then I had to wait for the holes in my back to heal up. Lisa came down to visit me and stayed in a boarding house just next to Weston-super-Mare.
And so what did you presumably eventually you were invalided out of the army, were you?
Sorry?
Did you choose to leave the army, or were you invalided out?
No, I went back to duty.
Oh, did you?
I was medical grade B or C or something.
Right.
I've been promoted to captain.
Right.
I'm not quite sure why I was promoted to captain, but I discovered myself when I came out of hospital that I was acting captain. And a couple of months later I became a war substantive captain, because I came out of hospital and went back to duty at the beginning of December 45.
Right.
And I was made adjutant of the 259 working POW camp. I had 3,000 German prisoners under command.
Goodness.
And there I had the whale of life. I lived like a king, and my colonel there, the CO, was a Royal Scots Fusilier who had a club foot,
Right.
and he used to come to the office at 8 o'clock in the morning, and at 8:30 used to say, "My leg's troubling me a bit," and I never saw him again. My second in command was an Indian Army alcoholic
Right.
who had a bottle of gin for breakfast every morning. So I never saw anything of him.
You
So
were left to your own devices.
virtually it was my camp.
So you never took up your place at Emmanuel.
No. Thought about it, but I then had a son,
Right.
and I was getting on. I decided to take some engineering training,
Right.
in particular draftsmanship was the start of it. Never pursued that particularly. My wife's father had quit his business in UK
Yeah.
and had taken a partnership in a cosmetics company in Copenhagen, and he had got some connection with a firm called Dans Gozelid, which printed printing paper,
So headed paper.
paper, they coated paper for producing reprints by exposure to ammonia.
Right.
And they had what was originally a German license, but which had been taken over by the Americans. And so they had a need for fair communication with American, and none of them spoke English. So they wanted an English correspondent. And my father-in-law introduced me to them, and I got taken on. We went to Denmark. I was still on leave from leaving the army.
Right.
And so I was still in uniform. And we moved into live in Denmark, and I worked there for this company, and eventually they made me office manager, and we had a little, it was a very tiny plant. It only had three labourer employees.
Right.
Well, a charge hand and a couple of employees. They put me in charge of that, and so I did 3 years in Denmark, and then I had a 3-year labour permit, and I came to renew it, and they were worried about unemployment in Denmark then, and they would only renew it on a 6-monthly basis. And I said, that's, how do I build a career for life on 6 months? So I came back to the UK, and I went to work for Unilever. I went to work for Dane in England when I first got back, but wasn't really a very good job. And I went to the British Legion officers' employment bureau in Victoria Street, and sitting behind the desk was an ex-Lieutenant General who, curiously enough, because I'd been a couple of years or more at the POW camp, and we ran an extraordinarily good mess. Whenever he was anywhere within 50 miles of
He'd always come.
Bowden House, he'd give us a call and say, can I come for dinner? And so I'd got to know him quite well, and there, sitting behind the desk, was a chap, and he rang somebody at Wall's Ice Cream, which is a Unilever company then, and the personnel manager said, well, I'm sorry, we're recruiting supervisors, but we've got 12 we're interviewing tomorrow, and that's the limit of we can't take any more. And this Lieutenant General lit into him and said, all the things I've done for you and helped you out with guiding people in your direction, either you take him or we stop talking. So I got took in as number 13, and I was the only person they appointed, which was quite fun. So I joined Unilever there, and I still have my long service watch.
That's amazing. Well, thank you. I hope you've all enjoyed that. I certainly thought that was very, very special. Veterans are a rare breed these days from the Second World War, and to have someone that age, that articulate, that kind of thoughtful about his experiences and what it meant, but also was told with such humour was really remarkable. And, it was a real treat for me. I hope it's been a treat for you as well. Thanks very much. Cheerio.